My daughter said, "It's dangerous for you to live alone," then showed me a photo of a scorched outlet and a flat fire extinguisher, everything placed just right to accuse me. I didn't argue. I brewed tea, invited the fire chief to drop by, then opened last night's camera footage. The drizzle soaked into the porch boards the way cinnamon sinks into the lines of your palm. I stood on a step stool, changing the smoke alarm batteries like I always do. Early November, a black felt tip note reading 11-1 on the little sticker by the cover. A quick beep and the kitchen went quiet again. Just the pendulum clock and the smell of apple pie I'd just pulled from the oven. My phone buzzed. Carla called with her voice pressed thin, like it had been clamped in a binder clip. "Mom, we're worried. Living alone isn't safe." Before I could answer, the screen filled with photos. A scorched outlet, cords bunched like an ant hill, the kitchen exit blocked by a wooden chair, the fire extinguisher needle sunk into the red. We had someone look, and they say it's high risk. Please sign this authorization so we can bring things up to code. I set the phone on the maple table darkened by years. Long ago, I learned to swallow everything slowly. Praise, blame, and those fears that arrive as glossy printouts. I added water to the kettle, the sound drumming on ceramic like the rain tapping the porch roof. That afternoon, Carla and Dylan showed up with a man in a reflective vest, a tool bag over his shoulder. He didn't give a name, just lifted a thick safety report in a plastic binder. Dylan smiled and said optics, like safety was a frame you could brighten. "Don't worry, Mom. It's the right thing. A training video for seniors needs the right visuals, too." The man slipped into the kitchen and started snapping photos. I let him. I know this kitchen like I know the scratches on the table and the round knobs my husband once installed with his left hand because the right one was sore after a long day of fishing. The things in their pictures, I didn't recognize them as mine, but I said nothing. "Sign here," the man said, "to authorize a few small changes, outlets, exits, rearrange a cabinet, and a new extinguisher." He held out a pen, the tip laid down a green line like moss. "I'll read it," I said, pulling out a chair and my glasses. I read very slowly, lingering on full authority, incidental costs, consent to film for educational purposes. I lifted my eyes. "Have some apple pie while it's still warm. We'll talk this through." Carla looked at Dylan. Dylan checked his watch. The man hitched his tool bag higher. I smiled the way I used to smile at kids who came late to the library. Kind, clear, and unhurried. I didn't sign. I poured tea and closed the visit with, "It's time for evening prayers." Another day. When the door shut, the house made a soft click like an exhale. I settled by the window and watched the rain sift across the lake. The far shore was a thin brushstroke of reeds. This time of year, the wind lifts a spiral of gold leaves and then lets them fall like letters no one claims. Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor, leaned over the fence with a tiny watering can. "May," she called softly. "Around 1 in the morning, I saw someone shining a light by your cellar door." "Probably kids. Lock up tight." I nodded my thanks. Inside, a single string in me vibrated. Small, long, not quite a warning, not quite peace. I opened the cabinet where the extinguisher hangs. The needle sat steady in the green, like a seed sleeping in good soil. My hand traced the shelf edge and found the sticker with the last service date. July 15th, checked. In the corner, my little notebook. Smoke alarms, change batteries in November. I'd just done that. If there's anything dangerous, it might be hurry. That night, Carla texted, short lines like a notice from the county office. "Sign it. Otherwise, we'll have to involve Adult Protective Services. Don't let it get to that." I stared at the words for a long time. Along the house's side, the wind whistled through a seam like a thin, off-key note. I put the phone down and took out my husband's wool scarf. He knitted our third winter on Lake Huron. when snow swamped the path, and every afternoon he checked the smoke alarms before he lit the stove. Safety starts with small habits, he used to say, and then smile, little lines peeking at the corners of his eyes. I dialed the fire station. Chief Nolan's voice was still as steady as it had been when he came to my husband's funeral. "May, what can I do for you?" "I need a surprise inspection," I said. "By the book, on the record. Not for anyone else, for me." He cleared his throat, the sound of someone measuring distance in the wind. "Tomorrow, early afternoon. I'll drop by unannounced. I'll log the time, seal numbers, everything." "Good," I said. "I'll make tea." I hung up, then took a small white box from the cabinet. Our simple home cameras from last year, flip-on switches with a phone app. I set one in the living room facing the porch and one in the kitchen facing the cellar door. I didn't want to turn the house into a guard post. I just wanted the house to keep its own breath overnight. Legal, tidy, just enough to remember in case memory slips. Outside, the rain had thinned to mist. I set the kettle on low and listened to the tick when steam kissed the lid. On the table, their safety report still smelled like fresh ink. I put on my glasses and studied the scorched outlet photo. The grout behind it ran warm beige. My kitchen tile is cool gray. Little details are like faint words between lines. You see them when you read slowly. I texted Carla back. "Come by tomorrow afternoon. I'll make tea. I'm listening." I paused, then added, "Before that, I want us to watch a proper inspection together." I blew out the small candle on the table. The smoke curled into a thin string and vanished into air that tasted of apple and cinnamon. On the lake, the wind flung a fan of maple leaves against the glass. 3 taps, then quiet. In this house, every sound has an age. Tonight, I wanted everything to keep its age. No older, no younger, not dressed up to fit anyone's look, but the truth. I didn't sleep well. The tiny house sounds, clock, wood swelling, wind at the seams, whispered by my ear, reminding me that everything keeps its own time, and if someone forces it off beat, you'll hear. I got up near 3, drank a sip of water, and looked out at the porch. The lake lay like a dark blanket murmuring along the grass. I glanced at the new camera, its green eye blinking a soft rhythm, asking nothing but to be on. By morning, the drizzle quit, and a pale web of fog still clung to the maples. I opened the blinds and cleared the kitchen table. I set cups and plates, a small pitcher of milk, a pot of brown sugar, and a tray of warm apple pie. In the distance, I heard the old fire station pickup, its low engine and brakes squeaking like an old man crouching to tie his shoes. Chief Nolan stood on the porch, his coat buttoned high, the brim of his cap darker than his steel hair. "Morning, May." "Morning, Chief." I keep from calling him Nolan, like I did when my husband was alive. There's a different distance between us now, the distance of duty. I saw it in his eyes, and I was grateful for it. He didn't step into the kitchen right away. By the book, he started on the porch, jotted the time, weather, humidity, the main door's condition. He used a small device to test the porch alarm. 1 sharp beep, then silence. Good. In the kitchen, he opened every smoke alarm, checked batteries and my date stickers. "Who labeled these?" he asked, gently. "I did," I said. "Habit." He made a small sound of approval and read 11/1. He lifted the extinguisher, shook it lightly, checked the needle. "In the green." He wrote into his log, "Good condition, serviced July 15th. I caught the faint metallic smell under the cinnamon. Down the hall, he opened the cellar door, flipped the light, and looked along the way down. The dry steps creaked. He checked the outlet in the concrete wall where my husband once set the pump. I remember that day, my husband kneeling on an old newspaper. Nolan tapped my marker note nearby. "Replaced 912 last year?" I nodded. He snapped pictures with the station's old camera, a clean tack each time, like an invisible hand stamping a seal. He didn't talk much, but every move had its weight. I followed the way a child follows an adult taking their temperature, half afraid, half trusting. When he closed the cellar door, the latch sank with the sound of a thought being checked and put away. In the living room, he checked the low outlets by the bookshelf. One faceplate had a fine scuff. I know exactly where the vacuum bumps it. He found nothing to note. Back in the kitchen, he sat, opened his log, and wrote, "No direct hazards observed. Recommend keeping the exit path clear. Met." He signed, then turned the page to the seal number. His handwriting still the same, firm, slightly leaning right. I poured tea. He cupped the mug in both hands and blew. "May, do you want this public?" "I want it right," I said. "Public, when needed." I smiled a thin smile. "Thank you, Chief." He nodded, and in that nod was the soft comfort men sometimes save for old women living alone. He left the paper on my table like a thin shield. Carla texted at 11. "We'll come by at 2." I said okay. I hung the tea set on its hooks, wiped the long table with a damp cloth, then sat a while to listen. Outside, the fog thinned. A neighbor boy skimmed a little boat along the bank. His oar made a black ink stroke on the water. I thought of the words in their authorization, those smooth words like full authority that hide the seams. At 5 to 2, a white SUV pulled up. Carla got out in a wine-colored coat, shadowed under her eyes. Dylan followed with a stack of papers, his sweater tight over his belly. The man in the reflective vest from yesterday wasn't with them. Something in me drew tight, like the feeling you get when you look in a mirror and realize you've missed a button. "We brought an updated packet," Dylan said, laying the stack on the table and pulling a chair like a negotiator. Carla sat beside him, hands on the table, taupe polish chipped at the tips. "Have some tea first," I said. I tried to look at my daughter before I looked at her husband, to remember the only thing that binds us isn't paper. It's winters we've come through together. "No, thank you," Carla said, tugging at her sleeve. "Mom, we just want you safe." Her voice stretched thin, like a string pulled too far. Dylan opened the folder. I saw the large words, "Petition for Temporary Guardianship." This time, the signature line wasn't for my consent. It was the acknowledgement that I'd been given notice. Just a way to slide it into my reach. "If you won't cooperate," Dylan said, "we'll file." It's our legal duty. Risks are high these days. "What risks?" I asked. It's a silly question. Risk lives everywhere, but I needed something specific to weigh like a sack of flour. "Electrocution, smoke inhalation, falls," he said, skimming the photos. "Look, the scorched outlet, the extinguisher fallen into the red, the kitchen exit blocked." I took the photos. The tile grout was warm beige. Mine is cool gray. I looked at Carla. "My floor is gray." Carla blinked as if she only now saw the floor. "Maybe the light," she said, voice thinning. "I always want the light right," Dylan cut in, smiling a taut smile like a face pulled smooth. "Optics need to be correct." "I had an inspection this morning," I said, placing the report in front of them. "The fire chief," unannounced, logged and signed. I said fire chief slowly so the simplicity of the title could wash over the table like water soaking a dry cloth. Dylan glanced and pressed his lips together. Carla read line by line. Her hand trembled. A familiar sadness rose up, the sadness of a mother who sees her child standing between two banks, neither of them fully right, both of them cold. "Even so," Dylan said, "that doesn't remove other risks." I spoke to a safety expert. He concludes, Moss. "Who is he?" I asked. "Part of our elder network for a media project," Dylan said, proud as if he'd cooked at home and now invited me to admire the kitchen. "His name?" I asked. He hesitated and gave me a plain, forgettable name. I nodded and opened my autumn folder. Inside were screenshots, the extinguisher service receipt, last year's electrician invoice, the alarm certifications, An old woman's valuables, time proving itself. Carla looked at her husband, her lips pale. "Dylan," she whispered. "I'm doing what's best," he said, but his best sounded like a label slapped over something else. "Someone was on my porch around 1 last night," I said, telling it like a story. "My neighbor saw, and she has a photo. The new kitchen camera that faces the cellar has video. I don't want to make a fuss. I just want to see things clearly." Dylan shot to his feet. "You're accusing us?" The first heat in his voice, but not a warm heat, more like an LED glaring too high. "I'm talking about what happened," I said, eyes still on Carla. "And if those things touch these papers, we need a third ear." "Let's go," Dylan said to Carla. "We're not here to be blamed." "I haven't blamed anyone," I said, slow as the living room clock. "But if someone asks me tomorrow, I'll tell them." They left. The door shut harder than yesterday, the engine louder than it needed to be. Inside, the jasmine tea cooled to a thinner, slightly bitter scent. Late afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez stopped by. She showed me a photo from her upstairs window. A man in a hooded jacket, carrying what looked like a coil of wire and a spray can. The angle didn't show his face, but the way his right shoulder dipped made my heart cinch with a familiarity I didn't want to name. "I don't want trouble," she said, her voice rustling like a paper sack. But I heard the beep-beep of a smoke alarm and then nothing, like someone pulled a battery. "Thank you," I said. "You've lightened the load." I gave her 4 butter cookies, a bunch of parsley, and my promise to water her chrysanthemums tomorrow. That night, I opened the camera app. The porch came up under a motion light. At 1:07 a.m., a man stepped in and crouched by the cellar door. A small beep, then silence. He turned his head just enough. I froze the frame and took a screenshot. The cut of his jaw showed, and I shivered when the thin metal of wire-rimmed glasses caught a flare. Dylan never leaves the house without glasses in the cold. I saved the files to a new folder. November Porch 1_07. In my notebook, I wrote a small sentence. "Everything has an age. Don't let someone change it with a marker." The next morning, I went to the county building. The court office is small, its glass door frosted. A clerk wrote my name on a list and handed me a sheet. Emergency hearing on petition for temporary guardianship. The date and time were stamped in blue. I called the pro bono lawyer from the church, Mr. Lang, blonde turned white, gentle smile. He said he'd come. "Let your papers do most of the talking," he said. I went home and didn't nap. I made a small pot of chicken soup, more to keep my hands working than for hunger. The kitchen filled with warm steam and made emergency feel less cold. I stacked my documents in a cloth tote and put the fire chief's report on top. My phone buzzed as I turned off the stove. "Carla, we're filing this afternoon, not to hurt you, to protect." "Good," I said softly. "I'll be there too, to protect." There was a small pause, like she hovered between 2 words. Then the line clicked off. The county courtroom is paneled in light wood, low ceiling, pew benches. A faded flag stands in the corner. The judge, a woman around 55, sat behind the bench, her glasses on a cord. Carla and Dylan were on the other side with their own folder stacks. Dylan's shoes had been polished too hard. The fluorescent lights painted a white slash across them. "Good," I said softly. "I'll be there too, to protect." There was a small pause, like she hovered between 2 words. Then the line clicked off. The county courtroom is paneled in light wood, low ceiling, pew benches. A faded flag stands in the corner. The judge, a woman around 55, sat behind the bench, her glasses on a cord. Carla and Dylan were on the other side with their own folder stacks. Dylan's shoes had been polished too hard. The fluorescent lights painted a white slash across them. "Petitioners," the judge said. Their lawyer, a young man with a pale blue tie, stood. "Your Honor, my clients, Mrs. May's daughter and son-in-law are deeply concerned for her safety. They have evidence, scene photos, a professional report, statements about medication confusion and fire hazards. He handed photos to the clerk. The judge glanced and nodded. Respondent? The judge turned to me. Mr. Lang touched my elbow. Keep it short. Let the paper speak, he whispered. I stood with my hand on the pew back, my fingers trembling. Your Honor, I began. I'm not young, but I'm careful. Yesterday, the fire chief came, unannounced, and logged my house safe. I passed the report to the clerk, and the photos aren't from my kitchen. The tile grout, the outlet placement, the light, they don't match. Their lawyer smiled. Light varies by angle, Your Honor. I agree, I said, turning to him, which is why I brought this. The photo metadata shows the pictures were taken 2 weeks before they came to my home. The location tags don't match my address. I held up a simple printout from a cheap program a library kid taught me to use. The judge lifted her glasses and studied a little longer. Her fingertip tapped the page edge. She looked up. What else? I have kitchen camera footage facing the cellar, I said. At 1:07 a.m., a man came onto my porch and handled the cellar door. Right after, my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, heard a smoke alarm beep and then go quiet. Mr. Lang held up a USB. The judge nodded and we paused to play it. The speakers were weak, but the porch view lit up when the man stepped into the motion light. He bent down. We heard the small beep, then silence. When he stood, the glint on thin frames flickered. Carla gripped her hands until her knuckles went white. Dylan dipped his head. The skin of his neck stretched tight. Response? The judge asked, mild. Their lawyer stammered. It could be, a passerby. At 1:07 a.m., the judge tilted her head. On her porch? Not sharp, just correctly placed. Dylan shot up. I was checking. I was worried. He spoke too fast. Carla tugged his sleeve too late. Someone conducted an assessment for us. By pulling a smoke alarm battery? The judge cut in. He swallowed. He looked around as if hunting a camera that might frame him well. He took a breath, but in that room there were no optics, just white light and black print. Mr. Lang stood steady. One more point, Your Honor. The safety expert isn't licensed by the state. He's a content partner on Dylan's YouTube channel. We have a sponsorship invoice for an episode titled Rescuing Elderly Parents. And here's a still from the draft upload, shot in an hourly rental kitchen that matches the grout and outlet in their evidence photos. He set 2 images side by side and traced the match points. The room went still. Even the 2 older ladies waiting on another matter and a young man in a work jacket stopped to look. I didn't look at Dylan. I looked at Carla. Her lip pinched. Her eyes went glassy, though no tears fell. Sometimes tears don't fall because when they do, there's no hand to catch them. The judge took off her glasses, laced her fingers. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied, she said, slow and clear. The court notes the home's safety per an unannounced inspection and finds evidence of staged hazards. The court issues a temporary restraining order against Mr. Dylan. He is not to approach Mrs. May within 100 yards or enter her property. As for Ms. Carla, communication by written counsel only for 30 days. File forwarded to the prosecutor to review for elder harassment and false reporting. Her gavel struck once, a neat sound like a nail driven straight into good grain. Outside, the air had sharpened. Wind slipped down my collar. I pulled up my scarf. Mr. Lang rested a hand on my shoulder for a second, then let go. Go rest, he said. I'll handle the rest. I'm grateful, I said. Sometimes gratitude is a way to breathe. Mrs. Alvarez was waiting on my porch with a small bundle of wild daisies tied in twine. May, she called, eyes bright. News runs fast in small towns, like wind through trees, light but full. I tucked the flowers to my chest, dry petal scent with fresh soil. Tea? For a bit, she said, setting her watering can beside the door and perching on the chair edge like a woman between chores. End of season, keep warm. I turned on the kettle. In the kitchen, everything was still its proper age. The extinguisher needle in the green, the 11/1 sticker, the nicks on the table. I don't know what comes after this. I only know I'm not the person who stands still while someone else arranges my story. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is the prosecutor's office. We've received the referral. We'll be in touch. Another text from Carla. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far. I set the phone down and poured tea. Will you reply? Mrs. Alvarez asked, unhurried. When the tea cools, I said, hot words scald. The next day, Chief Nolan came by in a brown jacket speckled with paint. He'd been at his fence, I guessed. He brought a flyer. Family safety class free at the church this Saturday. I'd like you to talk about your inspection, little habits that help. He smiled. I want older folks to hear this from another older person, not me. I'm not good at crowds, I said, but a string in me thrummed, low and sure. I do know how to date a sticker, change a battery, and place a can within reach. That's plenty, he said. I looked at the flyer. Saturday. I remembered our Saturdays at the farm market, my husband paying with flat, exact bills he kept like a small secret. I made a list in my head: smoke alarms, extinguisher, exit path, emergency numbers taped inside the fridge door, the little things that, after a week like this, gleamed like nails polished at the right time. In the days that followed, some folks sided with me. Others said I'd gone too far taking family to court. At the grocery checkout, the clerk said, "You did right." At church, an older man said, "If it were my kid, I'd keep it in-house." I smiled at both. The town wrestled with its little certainties. The way the lake wind sometimes shoves waves hard at the bank and sometimes slides away, never changing the shoreline but always trying. Carla texted a few times, short, careful lines, sometimes just, "Have you eaten?" I kept my replies short, too. "I have. Keep warm." I didn't scold with long paragraphs. I left blank spaces to carry what needed saying. I know part of her life had been blown sideways by Dylan, by clips, by promises that a prettier look would be better than truth. But I also know without her nod, it wouldn't have gone this far. One afternoon, a letter came from the prosecutor. They were considering elder harassment and false reporting for Dylan. I sat with the page for a long time. I don't like to picture a person, my son-in-law even, walking from my table to a cell. But the law has its own work, drawing a line where family couldn't. That evening, I wrote Carla a letter by hand, back straight, like when I taught kids to check out books. Carla, I am still your mother. When you're ready to tell the truth, I'll make tea. I added, no video is prettier than the truth. No optics can save a story built on fear. I folded it into a pale blue envelope with a Michigan Black Bear stamp. Saturday, the church opened its hall. I set out a tray of apple pie on a red cloth. Chief Nolan pointed to a poster. Safety starts with small habits. I laughed. You stole that from my husband, I said. He smiled. Some lines deserve stealing. I spoke little. I showed how to date stickers, where to buy and place an extinguisher, how to walk the house in shoes with grip. I passed around a can so folks could feel its weight. One lady's hands shook. I set my hand over hers and steadied it. Nothing shameful about shaky hands, I said. The point is to put the can where shaky hands can still reach it. People nodded. Pens scratched. Somewhere a child giggled because someone popped a water bottle cap. The small family noises that shelter us. At the end, I saw a figure outside the glass, hat low, hands in pockets. Carla. She didn't come in. She stood like a semicolon between sentences, enough to pause, not yet to end or begin. I went out. The wind flicked her scarf. Her eyes were red. I came, she said, rough. I didn't dare go in. Come, I said. There's tea and pie. And people who won't look at you like a camera. She shook her head. I know I was wrong. I didn't think Dylan. She stopped, groped for words. I was a coward for not stopping it. I kept thinking if we got through one more clip, things would get better. Then another. I wanted you at my place, not because you weren't safe, but because I was afraid you'd see I don't live the way you pictured. I put my hand over hers, cold fingers. I never wrote a script for you, I said. I don't need a theme. I need the truth. I took the letter from my pocket and handed it over. I wrote this. I'll just read it now. When you're ready to tell the truth, I'll make tea. I smiled. The kettle's set. Anytime. She swallowed. The birches tossed tiny moving shadows on the ground. I'll go home and speak with a lawyer, she said. I'll do my part. Good, I said, giving her hand a light squeeze. Grown-ups have their own parts. I didn't say Dylan's name. Each thing in its turn. Every road has signs. I returned to my rhythm, but not quite the old one. The change wasn't an extra lock or a new camera. It was knowing I could stand straight behind a wooden table, hold a stack of paper, and say, let's deal with this in the truth. I updated the extinguisher and carefully peeled the frayed sticker edge. Each evening, I sat on the porch and watched the last maple leaves tangle and then drop. No staging, no direction. One night, with the tea halfway poured, the window lit with headlights, the white SUV at the gate. Carla walked up alone, hesitating at the door. I opened it and let the steam drift out, a small invitation. If you want, I said, we can let the porch camera rest a while. She nodded, her eyes hollow with tiredness. I'd like that. I tapped the app. The green light went dark, a firefly dimming to leave room for another light, the kind that comes from a talk that doesn't need proof. We sat at the old table that's seen too many meals and seasons. I poured tea and set a cup before her. Say what you need, I said. It doesn't have to be the right words, just the right heart. She talked, slow, with stumbles, sometimes choking up, about debt, rentals, Dylan's claims that sponsors only pay when the story has drama, about the time she stayed silent because she feared she was wrong, then stayed silent longer because she knew she'd been. I listened. Sometimes I nodded. Sometimes I offered a tissue. Sometimes I sipped to keep from saying a sentence too early. When she stopped, only the clock and the wind spoke. Safety starts with small habits, I said. You know that now. And one more thing. Family starts with a true sentence and grows with more. I squeezed her hand. Tomorrow, come to the church. There's another safety class. You'll see old folks learning to hold a can. After that, if you want, stay for soup. She nodded, and for the first time that night she smiled a little. I want soup. The prosecutor chose community service over jail for Dylan, plus a mandatory ethics course and an extended restraining order. Some called it too soft. Some sighed with relief. I didn't feel joy or disappointment. I cooked a pot of bean soup and filed the court letter in my winter folder. Seasons change and things come to their sections, like ice on the lake. Thin and ragged in places, thick and reflecting the sky where it needs to. I sold a strip of land behind the house, the part I hardly used, and set up a small fund for the church's safety class to buy smoke alarms and extinguishers for seniors with tight budgets. I named it Small Habits. The chief says the name makes him chuckle when he reads the budget. Chuckling is good for the lungs. One morning, watering parsley, I heard dawn sweep across the lake like a feather duster. Sun touched the porch step, the watering can handle, the worn band on my hand. I thought of my husband, of Carla, of seasons that might come. an apologizing man, a steadier woman, a new baby, or just more layers of snow and the crack of ice underfoot. I'll meet them the way I've learned, unhurried, labeling dates on what must be remembered. The question, AITA? Am I wrong for taking my son-in-law to court, asking for a restraining order, exposing painful things? I left it on the table edge for days. Sometimes I touched it like a smooth river stone. Some days I thought I could have done it kinder. Others I thought if I hadn't, this house wouldn't keep its right age. Maybe I'm wrong to some, but toward myself and toward safety and truth, I've been just kind enough. That evening, Carla came with a lemon tart. She cut clumsily. The corner collapsed. I laughed. Ugly corners taste best. She laughed too, eyes wet. I brewed tea. The kettle sang, and somewhere a small beep chimed. The smoke alarm's periodic self-check, a sound I've known all my life. It no longer made me think of a man crouched at the cellar door. It made me think of a child I once taught to shelve a book, then later found putting a whole row straight on their own. In the wooden house on Lake Huron, everything returned to its rhythm. Not perfectly quiet, life never is, but quiet enough to hear a spoon touch a cup, a dry leaf drop on the step, wind in the crown of trees, and my daughter take a long breath, let it out, and say, steady and clear, like someone stepping onto a different shore, "Mom, thank you. That is